Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. I'm Dr. Stacey N.C. Grin. I'm joined by our legal experts, Royce Russell Esquire, Edward Pichardo Esquire, and we thank you for tuning in 4 p.m. every Wednesday for this conversation. And we appreciate when you share your comments, where you share this broadcast out with others and let them know about the information that we are always sharing in real time about what's happening in the world. So, good afternoon, Kevin. Always a pleasure seeing you. Thank you for joining us. And we have a lot to cover. But before we get started, let me let our co host say hello. Over to you, Mr. Russell.
Oh, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Can't wait till we get started. There's a lot of information, informative and otherwise, that we would love to relate to our audience to keep you abreast, keep you up to date, keep your ear to the ground so you know the latest and greatest, and you heard it from us first. So, welcome.
Thank you. And Señor Picharo, ¿cómo está?
Muy bien, doctora. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Buena tarde, mi gente. How you doing, folks? Welcome to Speaking Legally. We got a lot of information today, and we hope you'll find it fulfilling as well as educational. Hang on, folks.
Absolutely. So, we always take a moment during the show to acknowledge those who become ancestors and have left their imprint on the world. And we have quite a few who have recently transitioned that we want to take a moment to just acknowledge what they contributed to society. And we're going to start first with a trailblazer, a quiet pioneer from Albany, New York, the first Black member of the Albany Common Council, and he died at the age of 85 earlier this month. And we definitely want to extend our condolences once again to his family, and grateful that we can capture the legacy that he was able to leave while here on the planet.
Now, this one right here is a particularly close one to our Speaking Legally family. Marvin Tanksley was the father of a friend, colleague, and frequent viewer, Sonia Tanksley, attorney. This was her dad, trailblazer, as the title of this article connotes. Tremendous laws for the Albany community and for the Tanksley family. So may you rest in power, sir. For the audience, I would welcome you. I would urge you to read the story about this gentleman. You'll certainly find it inspiring, and just overall, just powerful.
One of the things that, in reading this story and doing the things that we do on Speaking Legally, which is pay homage to our ancestors, is that we want to make it clear when we say notable, that doesn't mean that worldwide, international, household name. Notable means important, relevant, someone that you should underline the name, put an asterisk and a star. And notable people can be right around you, right next to you, right in front of you, or right behind you. And it's not so much whether the world recognize you for what you have done versus what you have done, and what Marvin Tankley has done during his life. Not only raising a family, not only living through the era of Jim Crow, moving from the South, coming to the North, um, getting in where he fit in. We hear that term. You better get in where you fit in. Well, when you come from the South and you come to the North, you need to find out where you fit in and do it well, and do it so well that other people want to promote you, highlight you, and move you on. Is nothing better than having someone else see the sparkling and shiny attributes that you have within, and take that and move you on. And then that's powerful. And so, as we say, rest in power to Marvin Tanksley, and a blessing to his family. And once again, notable pioneer, not only in Albany, but in the state of New York, playing his role in politics.
Absolutely. A lot to be learned, and we encourage everyone to go ahead and view that article. And our condolences once again go out to our friend Sonia Tanksley. Never easy when you have to say goodbye to someone that you love, especially someone who had a very public life and gave a lot of service when so many want to pay respect, sometimes privately. We just need a moment to deal. So we wanted to just do our part in sharing this as a tribute to him as we share another tribute to another pioneer, Peter Pryor, who was 95, I believe, as he was a civil rights leader and in World War II veteran, quite a bit on his roster and resume. And this was one of the many articles that were written to highlight the work that he provided in the civil rights era.
Yeah, and listen, a trailblazer, I believe, first black graduate of the Albany Law School since Reconstruction, I believe. 'Cause I think I saw some other article mention that, but just a real civil rights giant in the Albany community. Fought those who were in power but were not respecting the rights of African Americans in that city. They had a fighter, a fearsome adversary in Peter Pryor. The other article that I read also mentioned a particular lawyer who, at the time, just wasn't happy with how things were going in his career. It mentions Mr. Pryor grabbing him and saying, get it together, get yourself together, let's get going. And that attorney eventually became a judge and went on to the bench. So, they also talked about that side of Peter Pryor being a good friend, in addition to being a servant to the overall community there. So much props to that gentleman as well. Albany is part of the focus here today. It's the state capital. People recognize it as the place of the New York State legislature and where the, governor sits. But there's also a vibrant black community in that city, be it as it may, being upstate. And so the work of those up there needs to be recognized for that community. So, may you rest in power as well, sir.
One of the things that I recognized when I looked at the article is that he was a vet, and how life is so easy for us who go to college, go to grad school, professional career, and do not have to deal with going to war and having that disruption, that departure, that trauma that takes place when you are killing and or will be killed, and then take that, be able to manage that, and still go on to live a professional life, which is quite profound, and make your way through society in a very professional way, and being able to deal with what we now know, the mental and emotional effects of being in a war. He didn't share that burden alone. For those who didn't know, we have Charles McGee, Brigadier General Charles McGee, one of the remaining Tuskegee airmen who also passed away. Now, he lived to 102, but you take a person like him, once again, an airman who basically fought through many wars. He fought through World War II, Korean, Vietnam, and when something that you said about Albany, and we talked about Mr. Tanksley and Marvin Tanksley, and we talked about Mr. Pryor, and how these people are moving quietly, basically in the space of Albany, that a lot of people do not pay attention to, unfortunately, even though it's our state capital, and they move quietly through there. But when reading Charles McGee's one of his sayings that he said, and I think is appropriate to those that we've talked about in Albany and what they have done today, he said, do what you will while you can. Real simple. Do what you will while you can.
No, and it's amazing how the those of that generation were then, because in the case of Pryor, he used the GI Bill to then fund his education upon returning to civilian life, taking something and flipping it to his advantage. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So
which wasn't always as smooth for a lot
no,
of our
not easy at
veterans.
all.
So
Right. And so if you say, do what you will while you can, that's it. I mean, you got to do anything extraordinary. You know what I mean? Just Just do what you got to do while you can. That sometimes will ride the day and right the ship, and
Absolutely.
put you in a place in the space in society you never even thought of.
And that's exactly what he did. And as we say, rest in power, there's someone else that we want to acknowledge. And yes, Kevin, we were getting to that story as well. We had quite a few to go through today, but do what you can. That that is definitely an overstatement for this person, uh, Andre Talley, and the amount of lives that he impacted and touched. Everyone is dealing with that reality right now of his passing at 73, which is relatively young. And Kevin said you spent 35 years in the fashion industry, and he was a great fashion historian, curator, editor, and writer in the entire fashion industry, and had a great influence on your career. So I know you are feeling it too. So we send out once again condolences to everyone who knew him personally, as well as everyone who watched and admired his career and body of work. I think that's a great photo they captured here for Vogue.
Yeah, and you know what? He was the editor at Vogue. Most people in, I guess, in the past generation, recent past generation, will remember him as one of the judges on American Top Model. He was executive with Vanity Fair, and when you think about how ironic it is that these major white magazines in fashion and who they put on the cover to represent fashion. And if you go to page 54, the back of the book, or you look at the preface, the front of the book, you have the legend Andre Leon Talley picking the outfits, right? So we got our hand in the cookie jar, one way or the other. And I think it's powerful that he carved a place in magazines that really didn't have us in the forefront of their minds. Now, most recently they have, but throughout history they did not. And so, once again, rest in power to him.
Definitely.
Absolutely. So, as we move now from the acknowledgement of our now ancestors that have gone forward, there is
I'm Dr. Grant. Dr. Grant, I'm sorry. Just one other person that I must acknowledge that I don't know if you guys. I was away in what you call in the field last week, but Ronnie Specter. Ronnie Specter,
Oh,
fabulous singer of the Ronettes, vocalist, renowned. I mean, we know about the Supremes. We talk about all these other, you know, black female groups, but Ronnie Specter was phenomenal. I mean, like I can hear the music being played right now in the old stomping grounds. You know, mom and dad did her right, and she went on to have a fabulous single, solo single singing career. Most people will remember her as Phil Spector's wife, and Phil Spector he passed away incarcerated for killing his next wife, his ex-wife, his next wife. You know what I mean? Ronnie Spector was a fabulous vocalist, and I would be remiss if I didn't say rest in peace to her.
I'm a little young to remember all of that music, but
Here we go. Here we
no,
go.
no, no. I remember when she had a resurgence in the '80s.
Yeah, that's only when you remember her, right? In the
Yeah,
80s.
no, no. I mean, that's how I came to know Ronnie, and when it wasn't Billy Joel, it was one of the other singer, I believe, out of Jersey. He used her on one of his songs, and had her recite "Be My Little Baby," the chorus, because that's one of
Right.
the songs that she's
Oh.
famous for. So absolutely, yeah.
Yes, and Kevin said that Ronnie Spector was a legend from Harlem. So acknowledging that as well. So rest in power to her. And that was one of the hooks that I really loved, when I was old enough to listen to it.
Oh yeah. Okay. All right. Uh-huh. Here we go again.
But, we also had some very sad and unfortunate news when we talk about those who are known for certain things that they have accomplished in their career. Unfortunately, we had to pay respects to lives lost in the Bronx fires. And there was another one recently. And in the top of the news today, Cardi B pledges to pay funeral costs for the Bronx fire victims. And our hearts continue to go out to those affected by this fire. And there was another explosion where the last time I saw a clip, it was one person dead, but multiple people wounded. And we want to extend our condolences to the tragedies in that fire as well. But there's some takeaways from what we saw happen with this experience that I would love our attorneys to weigh in on.
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, as we try to present as much news as we can, we want to make sure that we take care of our folks that are local, right? And so we're trying to do our best to cover a lot here today. And one of the things that we did want to cover is not only the great news of Cardi B, not only unfortunately the tragedy, but to be informative, right? To be empowered, to be proactive, and this is not placing blame on anyone in reference to the results that took place, given what happened in the Bronx. But we're on this subject matter, and so what can we do to protect ourselves? In particular, if there is improper heat in your apartment, if your building is quote unquote violating code. So, as I do, I did a little digging, and I went through at least New York, what they call heating laws, which basically know your rights. And I'm not an expert in it, but one thing about retaining a good attorney, if they are not an expert, they know where to go to get the expertise. And so I am showing you that today, in that there are heating laws, there are guidelines out there. And so heating season starts October 1st and runs through May 31st. I'll repeat it again. Starts October 1st and runs through May 31st. That is a point of information that you should know. And, when we talk about time and space, there's always a winter, and there's always below freezing temperatures in the Northeast, and there's always snow, right? And so heating must be kept at a certain level depending upon the time of the day. That's something that you should know. So let's talk about it. If the temperature is below 55 degrees Fahrenheit, then inside the amount of heat that an apartment or a building should have is 68 Fahrenheit. So if it's below 55 Fahrenheit outside, it should be at least 68 Fahrenheit inside your apartment or the whole building and the whole building, right? And that's between the hours of 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. I repeat, between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. If it's 55 degrees outside, inside it should be 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., regardless of what the temperature is outside, at the very least, the apartment and the building should be at 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Not to say that it needs to be at 62 and can't go higher, but despite the temperature outside from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., at a bare minimum, it has to be 62 degrees Fahrenheit inside. I did not know that. I can admit that I did not know that. That even exists. That paradigm even existed, except for the heat got to be on.
Yeah, I've been aware of that. I've had to actually complain about landlords not providing the proper amount of heat. I once had to threaten a landlord who wanted payment of rent but did not want to provide the heat. The big thing with these heating laws is, as you are well aware, Royce, is sometimes it's not just about the law. More importantly, it's about enforcement. And so,
without a question,
unfortunately, what ends up happening in many cases is that, the complaints will be made, but then the heat is not given. Landlords come up with all sorts of excuses for why, the heat isn't where it's supposed to be at, ranging from, we're trying to fix the 500-year-old furnace and right now it's too costly. We haven't been able to, or it just broke down and we're working on it, and several days and weeks go by. It's just, the other day, even after the fire that took so many lives in Fordham Heights, I was reading an article about a woman with 2 children who was enduring freezing temperatures in her apartment because apparently the landlord was arrested for some sort of crime. The So therefore there's no apparently a landlord to be served with the proper ordinance violation or citation. And the only response that the city had for this woman was for her to go into the shelter system. And what she stated was that she had been robbed previously in the shelter system and recently came out of it and was able to obtain that apartment that is now freezing. And the article mentioned also citing an attorney who's a housing attorney familiar with the laws and enforcement procedures, who pointed out that the city had the ability on its own to send someone to restore the heat and should have been looking to do that instead of recommending that this woman go into the shelter system with her 2 small children.
And let me stop you right there. And that information that you're giving right there, hopefully we can serve to be a stopgap to some of the stuff that you're saying, right? And what I mean by stopgap, you go to a mechanic and you don't know anything about cars, and I'm not just any disparaging mechanics, but let's just anyone, right? You go to a mechanic and you don't know enough about your car, they can tell you anything. You don't know if it's right or wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to go with the flow. Right?
Absolutely.
If any complaint, especially people of black and brown, complain about anything, you're going to get rebuffed. You're going to get rebuffed. That's it. It's just, oh, well, there's nothing we could do. Go to the shelter. Even when you go to return the item to the store, right? And you know the policy. The first thing the person says, oh, no, we can't return that. You're like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Right? What are you talking about, Willis? Right? And then you get the manager, and all of a sudden you're getting the credit, and all of a sudden you're buying something new. So we know there's always going to be a stopgap.
Well, I remember this one reggae song that said persistence overcomes resistance. so you have to be persistent.
Without a question. That's without a question. And if you're going to resist, right, you got to know what is out there for you, right? Because if someone says, oh, go to the shelter, and you don't know that there's other avenues, right? You're not empowered with information. That's what you do, right? So, one, you got to be able to say you contacted the landlord, you contacted the management, you contacted the super, you wrote a letter, something. That's number one. Number two, if you live in New York City housing, you got to go to my NY. I think it's what my NYCHA, right? .com. You got to file that complaint online.
If it's a NYCHA property,
you got. If you live in New York City housing, you got to do that, right? First thing they're going to ask you, just like with employment cases, right? First, did you file a claim with the EEOC, the Equal Opportunity Commission? If you didn't, they're not going to hear from you. So you got to file that claim.
And normally there's a number, some sort of number or reference attached to it that you should take down and be prepared to provide to all those you contact.
That's right. So you need to have that complaint number. We always talk about when you file a complaint against police and you go to CCRB, Civil Complaint Review Board, you get a complaint number. So you got to get that stuff, right? So when you make that call and you bump into that person that's giving you resistance, you can be persistent and say, I did this, I did that, I did these other things. And then you'll start to see, some other things that may happen. But I'll even take it one step further. Winter happens every year. Most people live in apartments year after year, year after year, year after year, and they have these problems every year. You have to be your own advocate. You have to stand up for yourself. I'm not saying that people have not, but I'm saying that you still got to continue to do such, right? And since we are lawyers, right, and we deal with evidence, right, and most people want you to show them rather than tell them. Then being your own advocate, you got to go down to the bodega, you got to go down to the corner store, you got to go down to the pharmacy, get yourself a little thermostat and be able to take the temperature in each room, be able to write it down in the logbook, the date, the time.
And now that we got the cell phones, you can take a picture of that.
That's right.
Of that temperature reader.
That's right.
I want to deal with
down there, put down somebody else and create the logbook that's going to help you in the long run. Because we know that this world runs on paper. You're not getting past paper. Yeah.
And one of the things that I want to address here, which may or may not be the elephant in the room, is the following here. Okay, the reason why we're talking about this, folks, is out of love. Okay, it's out of love. What do I mean by it's out of love? I want our
Man, I didn't know
folks.
you loved me like that, bro.
Yeah, I love you. I love
Oh,
Dr. Grant.
come
Yes,
on
I
now.
love.
My main
I'm a
man.
lover.
You know what I'm saying?
All right,
Yeah, that was
Oh
my
boy,
birthday.
so
he's
the reason why I say this is because the last thing we want folks in our community is to resort to the use of a space heater.
Correct.
The last thing we want our folks to resort to is turning on the stove. And as a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine told me one time he did was, I've never done this, but I've heard of people doing this, setting up camp by the stove because there's
Why
no
you gotta
heat in the
talk about me
apartment.
like that, Ed? Don't
Now,
talk
I ain't
about me
talking
like
about
that.
you, so
Hey,
don't
look,
even.
look. Let me just tell you something. You ain't talking about me now, but you caught me in 1972. That
Uh,
window was open, brother, and
no,
we was sitting right by it.
yeah, because this tragic fire in Fordham Heights. What was discovered later on, as the investigation unfolds and the news stories roll on, is that these the inhabitants of the apartment where the fire started had multiple space heaters running at the same time. Okay, not I guess not plugged in properly, and so what I want to make sure nobody that's listening to us thinks is that we're blaming those folks or blaming
We are
anybody that does any
no.
of those things,
No.
because we
We are
understand
informative. We are being
why
informed.
people do it.
Right.
We understand why people do it because we've been there ourselves in some cases, and so we know why people do it. And so as I mentioned on the last show last week, I hope the prop investigation takes place and they get to the bottom of this, because I just have a hard time believing that was an isolated situation at that
Oh, it's
building.
not.
Maybe it was,
No,
but
what is isolated is that a fire and a tragedy came out of it. That
yeah,
is isolated,
and
it was reported.
And I hope that this inspires those in power to pay closer attention to what is happening around the city, to low income residents, to renters who, when they put in that heat complaint, what does the city do with that complaint? Okay, what action is taken? Because we just can't have these things happening anymore. We can't. I mean,
at all.
And one of the things, to your point, Ed, I mean, look, as educated as one might think I am, or educated as I think I am, I had a gentleman, family member, who came into town, and their daughter was going to college, so I had to be here to help them through that process because they helped me, and they were going to college here in the city. And he was doing some work around the house, and he looked at my surge protector and the plugs I had in it. He was like, "Man, that's a fire hazard waiting to happen." And I was like, "No, it's not. I got a surge protector." He's like, "Look, there's too much juice going into that, right?" And I'm thinking, let me go get the surge protector. All right, it's a surge. I'll put all these plugs in here. And he's like, and it was no heater. We just talking computer, TV, printer. He's like, there's too much going on here. That is very, very small to what we're talking about, which is very, very big, right? So you got the space heater. Do you have a surge protector? Electrical fires happen in the wall. And once they happen in the wall, there's no turning back. So once again, we're trying to be informative as possible, coming from a place of love, coming from a place of sincerity, coming from a place of culturalism. And so once again, contact the owner, contact NYCHA, contact the super, contact the landlord, collect
call 311.
Call 311, put your violation, Class C violation, online. The landlord and the owner get penalized $250. You know what I mean? Start the housing proceeding, even though it may take forever. You got to have something on record. And then this is the kicker that a lot of people don't know. There's a kicker. Apply for the state for a reduction in your rent for those who live in New York City housing. There's a commission that deals with that. And let me see, the State Division of Homes and Community Renewal, called DHCR.
Yeah.
DHCR. Let me repeat, State Division of Homes and Community Renewal, DHCR. You can apply and you can get a rate abatement. You get money back.
And listen, folks, I've seen in the past sometimes the amount of these complaints for housing that's HPD funded, controlled, or operated. These buildings get funded, and they hire these management companies that are responsible for the maintenance and the upkeep of these properties. And if they get enough complaints, that management company will lose their contract and another one will get hired. And in some cases, that hopefully that next management company will go about the task of, say, replacing old equipment in that building to properly give heat to those residents.
And it's important for us to share this information, because this is where the legal meets the cultural. So we're talking about situations where we might not have access to this information. Who knew about the Division of Housing and Community Renewal? I'm sure if you poll a lot of people in our communities, they wouldn't know they had somewhere to go in addition to the complaints that we've talked about. And that's why it's important to share information once you get it and be able to advocate and keep going. No matter what doors might be closed, keep knocking, keep pushing until you get answers, because we can't afford to lose any more lives. And that it just really was a tragic situation. And we want to make sure that communities, especially in the city where we have so many cultures, languages represented, that people have access to information and don't feel like they can't say anything or afraid to say anything, that they can get the due resources that are available to them.
And much props to Cardi B. I mean, because I'm sure she's not the wealthiest resident of our city, but yet she chose to go ahead and step up in this time of need.
But she's
to take care of these people, she's BX down, no doubt.
BX down,
but I'm pretty certain she's not the wealthiest person in the BX either.
I'm just saying we gotta look at the Harlem Cats a little different. But anyway, the
well, we're gonna keep it moving. We're gonna keep it moving.
One other thing I do want to say is that we spoke to those who our information is directed to those who need it. But then on the other hand, here's the other side, heads and tails. Hey, for those who are listening out here who are owners of property, who have investment property, who are renting out to others, be on the right side of the ledger. You know what I mean? I know it may cost a little bit to get the new boiler. It may cost a little bit to go out and get the new heater, and but it's an investment property and you have someone living there and they are paying your rent. So do the right thing.
Yep.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And once again, our hearts and prayers go out to the survivors who had to, I think it was a group funeral that recently happened for a majority of those who transitioned from this fire. So, and the kids, the babies that were involved, it really, really tugs at your heart. So I hope that this information was helpful to those of you that have heard it, but more so, make sure you share it and let people know what's available in these situations where the law is being broken because heat is not at where the degree or the temperature that it needs to be during the day and during the night. So that's access to information. So now we have a couple more storylines that we want to touch on today to deal with some updates in the news. One unfortunate incident that we all witnessed when the Haitian Prime Minister was assassinated. There's been breaking news in that story that an ex-senator was arrested over his killing, apparently found in my beautiful island of Jamaica. So interesting here in how they're going to proceed with, I guess, a trial for him now that they have arrested him.
Well, let's hope he makes it to a trial. I mean, John, Joel, Joseph, and 2 others were detained in Jamaica for this killing. And let's hope that there's a trial by their peers. If the folks disappear, don't be surprised at that. This is where the cultural meets the legal, and sometimes the cultural takes over the legal in certain countries.
Because I think the investigation is ongoing as to what the motivation was behind this, and I gotta feeling it's coming. It comes from outside of Haiti, and it may be closer to our homes than we believe.
Well, I
The
tell you
United
one thing.
States
I tell
has
you
a history of interfering with Haiti and the rest of the Caribbean and the leadership in those countries. So it's
and
going to
look,
be interesting.
look, with the new people that we have power locally, like our Attorney General Letitia James, who's making sure that Trump has his day in court. Don't be surprised if we find out who doing what and when and where, and she's running to the microphone doing the right thing. Because I know people think the days of Trump is over, and I'm transitioning to a whole nother piece that we didn't even talk about that we was going to talk about. But we got Letitia James, power to the people, that's out there making sure that every rock is turned over in reference to this man being able to break the law and do what he did. And so, from fraudulently valuing his assets so he can get insurance coverage and avoid paying taxes, and so he can get loans, which leads to his daughters. Now that the governor, the idea for running for governor is to the sidelines, and she is remaining as the AG and laser focus. A lot of tea leaves are going to be falling, not only in reference to this story, but to President. What was he? President 45? Was that his number? Huh?
I think it was 45.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
It was.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
this is the piece that makes you really think about the fact that in this story, just alone with capturing that one senator, that he was a part of, I think, 40 people. They're looking for multiple people. So it's not just one person. This was a conspiracy, and there were a lot of hands that got dirty in this tragedy. So it's interesting when we think about how that's going to continue to play out. Now we have another. You were saying something, Mr.
No,
Russell?
no, I was saying right, and he was detained with two other people. So the story might be about John, Joel, Joseph, but there was two other people that he was with as well. So yeah, the plot thickens.
It does. It absolutely does. So now we have this other story in Fayetteville where folks are rallying around because of the death of this young man. Um, we're not quite sure all of the facts yet. I guess they're still sharing and disclosing the facts, but it just still doesn't add up of how someone is dead as a result of this interaction with law enforcement.
Yeah, I mean, apparently Jason Walker, 37 years old. I believe he's the father of a teenager, residing in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Reports seem to indicate that he was running across the street, may or may not have had some sort of mental health episode, but ended up either being struck on top of a vehicle that belonged to I believe, a sheriff's deputy or law enforcement officer who happened to be off duty at the time with his wife in the vehicle. He claims that Mr. Walker jumped on top of his hood, pulled off one of his windshield wipers and started hitting the car with it, causing him to exit his vehicle and shoot Mr. Walker to death. Emergency trauma nurse happened to be near the scene or on the scene, named Elizabeth Ricks, and she rendered aid to Mr. Walker. The off-duty officer, who happened to be white, Jeffrey Hash, doesn't really do anything to render aid. In fact, apparently, Miss Ricks was asking him questions as to where exactly he shot Mr. Walker so she could try to tend to the wound, and didn't get a response other than, oh, you jumped on my car. And, I believe some limited footage was released. I don't know if off-duty officer Hash had a cam on in the car, or whether somebody else filmed what happened, but it's, there hasn't been a complete rendering. And in fact, I believe that, some sort of FOIA request had to be made to the authorities to release whatever limited amount of footage or footage that they had in their possession regarding this incident. But the bottom line is the off-duty officer has not been arrested, is on administrative leave, I believe, pending investigation. The only firearm that was seized was the one he used, not his service weapon. And protesters, or rather the city council of Fayetteville, is asking for the DOJ, the Department of Justice, to do an investigation. They seem to not trust the authorities. I believe that the article mentions the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation investigating the incident in conjunction with Cumberland County authorities, which is the county which Fayetteville sits in. So the story seems to be unfolding.
It seems like there's a lot to chew on this, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that, from a legal perspective and from a practical perspective, is open, right? One, I am totally surprised that he's placed on any administrative duty whatsoever in this regard, because we've seen police officers in the tri-state area
do worse
while on duty. Let me repeat, while on duty.
And one of the things I just want to mention here, and I think, Royce, you may be on the same page with me, is we have to look at this from a certain lens, okay? Was Officer Hash under imminent danger justifying exiting the vehicle and then shooting this man? Okay, let's look at that, because some folks may say, oh, if you run up on my car and you pull off my windshield wiper, you're gonna get capped right away. And it's like,
this is part of the Pandora box that we're in, right? Because we have someone who is off duty, but their profession is law enforcement. So they have some sense of, one, career professionalism. Two, do they have an above average duty of care not to act in a certain way because of their profession? Take that and bring it up against the fact that he was off duty. Does that stop? Is Fayetteville and that area a right to carry state, and therefore, stand my ground and all any other type of state law that they have out there, because it wasn't his service gun that he used, it was another gun that he used. I mean, the questions that go on with this is forever. And the fact that the police department decided to put him, on administrative leave, like I said before, wow, I'm impressed. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be out there marching. We shouldn't ask for an investigation and everything else that we think needs to be done, because we've seen how crooked lines are. But that's something to look at too. I mean, all those factors woven into one brings a pretty explosive, conflicted presentation to the floor.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Listen, we have to, the right standards have to be applied here. I mean, a lot of questions are being posed to the police chief in Fayetteville, who happens to be a woman, Gina Harkins. She appears to be a woman of color. I'm just not sure from the photos. We're going to see how this progresses, okay?
Yeah.
The proper standards have to be, applied. What was good for the goose is good for the gander. Did this man have an elevated duty? He claims that apparently that when Mr. Walker ran out to the road, he stopped his vehicle, and then Mr. Walker jumped onto the car. So, why he exited the car? Why did he pull off? What did he do?
A lot of questions.
Hey, look,
deciding whether to shoot.
I ask those questions every day. A police officer enters someone's apartment, and no one's in their apartment, and they're no threat to anyone.
Yeah.
What the hell is that person doing dead. Leave the
Yeah.
apartment, right? Leave the
Yep.
Hmm.
apartment, right?
Yeah. Why
Do I
you
have to
didn't
put,
pull off?
do I have to put a name with that case? I don't think so. Like, leave the
No,
Yep.
you
apartment.
don't have to.
No, not at all.
So,
We
Boy.
we are aware. So we will
Mhm.
continue to watch this because a lot of questions. Windshield wiper
And
versus
the
a gun.
year just started. The year just started. We ended the year talking about these incidents, and we starting right back.
well, and look,
Which
and
is
we know when summertime comes.
Summer, summer, summertime.
Look at
well,
this boy. Look at this
oh
boy
boy,
right here.
both of you are on the rhyming today. Lord have mercy. All right, so now we're going to get into two other stories that are dealing with the government and the ongoing debates in government. So the first one, in light of the fact that we celebrated Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday this Monday, and we know that some people just took it as a day off, but his birthday is a day on, and how can we continue to keep the dream alive and the work that he started and did. It's important for us never to forget and celebrate how far we've come, but we still have a whole lot further to go, as evidenced by the Senate debate in the fight to end the voting bill filibuster. What do you all say about this?
I'm just going to say something really brief, and Ed can have the floor because this is his. He already warming up. He already warming up to the dance floor.
No,
Like
no.
nobody even asked him to dance. He dancing by himself. Like you know how when you at the club and you like, yo, you see that one? She dancing. Like I'm rolling it up right there. The other one's standing still. You're not going to ask her to dance. You're going to ask the one who's dancing. Ed is dancing right now, so I'm gonna let him dance on. But what I will say is that I just don't understand. I don't understand the Democratic Party. Like the Republicans say, we're gonna open up the door. Everybody, let's open up the door. Democrats go to do something. We're gonna open up the door. There's always somebody somewhere like, nah, I don't really.
Did
Oh, I
Royce's
think he's
screen
frozen.
froze?
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
frozen for a minute. I was trying to
So
give it a second to come back, but jump on in until he, is able
yeah,
to finish his thoughts.
I mean, I think what's happening here is simply that the Democratic Party, they first of all, the Democratic Party is much more diverse, ideologically, racially, and gender, the whole nine, more so than the Republican Party. Okay, so what you have here, basically, unfortunately, is from what I understand, you have two senators, Senator Joe Manchin in West Virginia and Kirsten Sinema. I always forget what state she comes out of. And they seem to be the two that are holding up this situation because I believe they need 50 votes plus the tiebreaker from Vice President Kamala Harris to end that filibuster vote, to then allow the voting bill to hit the floor, be voted on. The John Lewis bill, I believe, is the symbolic name of that bill. And, unfortunately, they don't seem to be able to get these two senators to budge. And the problem here, too, is that what I've noticed a lot of times is with the Democrats in particular is you will have these fringe electeds who kind of, in my view, take advantage of the close numbers. They take advantage of these close numbers to turn themselves into kings and queens and to have an inordinate amount of influence on legislation and the passage of it. And we saw this, with that infrastructure build, I guess Build Back Better and so forth, where you have Manchin, from little old West Virginia holding everything up. Like, come on, really? Are you serious?
I think sometimes you have fox in sheep clothing. I'm saying I'm a Democrat to get to where I need to go, but I'm not really about it. I'm really about something else.
And you had that happen on the New York State level for a number of years where the Senate Democrats had a majority, but there were fringe Democrats who created their own caucused, or the term caucus means kind of meet with or confer with. They voted with alongside the Republicans, and they benefited from that individually when they would not otherwise have in the, a greater pool. And so, this is, you see this kind of happening not only on that high federal level, in this case, the United States Senate, but you also have this happening in many cases locally where, elected officials will use to their advantage these close, numbers to exercise influence that they otherwise wouldn't have on the process. I just hope that, Schumer and others who are the power players in the Democratic Party figure out a way. I mean, harkening back to legendary individuals like, LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson, who used to, and I'm talking about Biden too, able to bring some of these individuals in that room and say, hey, listen, what's going on?
But LBJ was an army man. LBJ was an army man, and look how we go full circle, right?
Do you mean to say he used to intimidate some of these individuals?
What I'm saying is that look how we go full circle when we discuss people in military and being successful in a profession that they so choose. There's something to that. It's just not by hook or crook. Somebody went in the room somewhere and got straightened out and came out with a different agenda.
Straightened out.
That's right.
It sounds like about those types of things.
Exactly. Right? Like, what?
Are you familiar with those tactics?
Excuse me? What? I didn't hear that.
This is a joke. I said, are you familiar with those tactics, Royce?
Yes, I am. Once again, I hail from the South Bronx, St. Mary's Projects. Mr. Russell would tell you there was a moment where you had to get straightened out. What they say, fix your face. Fix your face. Right? Okay. I'll leave that alone.
We'll leave that alone. But words escape me when we look at what we're debating for voting rights. It just words escape me that this is even a thing, but it speaks to all of the ways that systemically we have so many issues that have not really been addressed the way it needs to be, because we should not be in this situation right now, but here we are. So,
but Dr. Grant, I think this highlights the elephant in the room, and what is obvious, and you're speaking to it, is that certain people are going to do what they want to do, right? I mean, like, here's something that makes sense. Look at the light before you cross the street. There's still people that just cross the street and expect the car to stop. And guess what? There are drivers that will stop the car because they don't want to hit the person because of all the liability and things that go with it. It's just people are going to be who they're going to be. You say police
right about that.
Too. People are going to be, politicians are people too. They're going to be who they're going to be. Whether it's what Ed said, they're going to be the king and queen, and they're going to leverage their power, and they're going to, or what I said, they're fox and sheep clothing. They're not really about what the Democrat agenda is. They're about it to get to where they got to go, but they got their own. I'm not saying they're necessarily Republican, but they got their own way of how the world should work, and it's unfortunate, but this is it. I mentioned to you this privately, and I mentioned to Ed publicly. We are in a time and place where we have ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and there's going to be a conflict. And we can look locally. We have some ordinary people that are in position to do some extraordinary things, and we already see the obstacles that are being placed in front of them for them to do what they need to do by playing with words and semantics, and you offend me here and you did that there. No, let's cut it out. We need to do some things. You want to talk to me about etiquette? We can talk about that later. Let's get the job done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you have people that, given their positions, you're surprised at the behavior that they're displaying. Mm-hmm. It's just you seeing just this raw, unapologetic exercise of power that's been taking place as of recent, and we're going to see where it leads. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, and the common people, because I believe in the power of the people.
Absolutely.
If these folks in these high places can't get it done, then the common folk are going to have to gather, organize, and do what they got to do and force the change.
Change has to happen. And, as we are wrapping up the show, we also wanted to highlight another debate when we talk about, once again, going back to something that comes up quite frequently on the show: who you elect matters, and what they actually do and advocate for. And now we're in another debate about the Supreme Court ruling and how that's impacting the challenges to Biden's vaccine mandate. So we know we're still in a health crisis. We know the surge, how unfortunately has claimed more lives. And as much as we would all wish COVID was not here anymore, it's still something that we just have to deal with. And it's interesting, this new debate that is happening around the mandate. So I wanted to get your insight on this before we wrap up today's show. We might need to do a little second part to this conversation because it's affecting so much. And we talked about labor laws, we talked about employees, and how this affects what you do if you're a business owner, what you do if you're an employee. So let's just touch on this before we close out today. What are your thoughts?
Well, this has to do with a rule coming out of a federal agency called the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. I think many folks are aware, should be aware that OSHA promulgates rules that affect safety in the workplace. I'm sure you've heard things like OSHA 10 class and stuff like that, where they talk about certain things that have to take place on a construction site per se to make it safe. And here my understanding is that the rule was that folks be vaccinated in these private workplaces, and the court found that rule to be an overreach and struck it down. And this many critics are saying that this is gonna reverberate because it also affects kind of the mandate of OSHA, the power of OSHA, in terms of their ability to enforce safety rules in private workplaces. And so this may have a deleterious effect, on those things. I mean, at the end of the day, safety in the workplace is a big deal, going back to the Triangle Shirtwaist fire. I mean, if the federal government can have some impact on safety in the workplace, because it's not just about this vaccine mandate. This is part of a larger landscape coming from the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court. Now, this is being, this reeks of politics, right? Because at the same time, they said, okay, we're going to give you a partial victory and uphold your mandate for healthcare workers. Okay, and so it seems like there was some sort of splitting of the baby here. I also heard this crazy story. Well, it's not a crazy story. I mean, I read about how Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who has to sit next to Neil Gorsuch, has not been attending the hearings in person because possibly, they didn't say because, but possibly because Gorsuch refuses to wear a mask. It's like, this whole concern. I mean, I really hope that Biden contemplates expanding the court. I don't care. I mean, some people are saying that's crazy. Yeah, nah, let's expand it. These people are playing hardball.
Well, let's go back to briefly in reference to the article. And you said it's politics. No, it's capitalism. It's really capitalism. At the end of the day, nobody wants to really mess with the private sector. The court is going to leave the private sector to do its own thing because that's where the money comes in. It's not coincidence that in order to bring wrongful termination, Title VII violation, discriminatory lawsuits in court are extremely hard. You have to show a pattern in practice. I mean, extremely hard, because most of the time, courts are there to protect the capitalist and the corporation. And so here we have the split. You want to deal with healthcare workers? Go ahead. They make us a certain amount of money. We got to keep people healthy. But you're not going to tell GE, one of the companies that decided, hey, look, we're not going to abide by the mandate, that I have to. And Citibank, kudos to you. They said, hey, look, you're going to keep your COVID-19 mandates in place, you know, but we're going to let you choose. We're not going to interfere with the capitalistic world. And yes, I hope that they do expand the court. And, you know,
We'll see.
we'll see. Right. As you
We'll
said, we'll
see.
see.
We'll see. At the end of the day, ultimately, we hope that everyone uses wisdom how they move about. The virus is real. It has taken more lives than we want to count. Those who have experienced the virus know how disgusting it is. And we want to see people healthy. We want to move past what has felt like a nightmare that's going on 3 years and come out on the other side of functioning with new. Let's face it, we didn't think we would have to get searched at the airport prior to 9/11. Now we're in a society, in a world where testing is going to become a new normal in order for us to just go about and live as safe as we can. So it's a lot to discuss. And
It's amazing how people accept that, but they won't accept wearing a mask, right? Or getting
and you know,
vaccinated.
a mask
Amazing.
A mask
Well,
doesn't,
look,
in my opinion, hurt anybody. It just protects you and protects others. But this debate has gotten so hot, heavy, personal. The attacks are crazy. Like, I just don't even understand some of what I'm hearing. And I'm just hoping that compassion can be found in the way that we deal with one another and that we survive this new age that we're living in, because the variants will continue to be what there be will be scientifically. If there's not enough of one thing, then it exposes other things, and we can go on and on and on and bring all the medical experts, the scientists, the activists on. At the end of the day, we have one life, and use that one life properly. Keep yourself safe, keep your loved ones safe, and let's do what we can to make decisions that will give the entire community the optimum chance on living a healthy life.
I mean, there was a day and time where certain people would yawn and sneeze in your face and act like if you said, hey, what's going on? They would look at you as if you didn't belong. I'm telling you, don't do that today. Don't
Abs-
take it from speaking legally. This is just one legal and cultural combination you want to take. You know, be aware.
Absolutely.
Be aware.
So we also had news that it came kind of late for me, and thank you, Kevin, for reminding us. And we are at the end of the show, but we are going to stop and pause to recognize someone who I had the pleasure of meeting and being on the show with, and didn't realize that he too has transitioned. And rest in power to Judge
Oh,
Bob
Bob
Pickett.
Pickett.
Yeah, so
Oh
I didn't
wow.
realize that
Wow.
happened 22 hours ago. This news story broke, and
Come
thank you.
on.
That's why it's so important for our viewers to let us know and give us information. This is hurting my heart. It was a pleasure to be in his presence. He was another true giant in media and BLS
And practicing law. Bob
and
Pickett was
practicing law.
practicing law.
Yeah,
He had a name. He had a name resonated in New Jersey. No two ways about it. Yes, we need to take some time to talk about it. I'm glad that you mentioned it. I want to do him due service, so we'll start that at the top of the next hour.
absolutely.
Sure.
So our condolences to the family and to the WBLS family that I've had a relationship with for years. That's a huge loss. So this was a packed show. We talked about quite a bit, but this is where the legal meets the cultural, where you can get some unfiltered dialogue from two experts that do this work each and every day and offer information, resources that can allow you to be more knowledgeable about the things that are affecting our community. So I want to thank our co-hosts. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Hey, Dr. Stephanie, how you doing? Thank you for being here as well. So final words, Senor Pichardo, and then over to Mr. Russell.
Ain't too many words to offer other than please, folks, be safe. I've been personally touched by this recently, and so I just really hope people make themselves aware of what's going on, and then really take care of themselves and their loved ones. And peace.
All right. Mr. Russell, any final words?
Everyone, take care. Be well. I'll see you on the next run go around. Thank you.
Bye bye, everyone. Stay safe and be well.